What do you think allowed you to have that food freedom around pasta again, which is something that still a lot of people or a
Yeah.
lot of women struggle with? And
Mm.
now it's like something that brings you so much joy and you cook with it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I know it's funny. It's like, had you asked me when I was really struggling, yeah, I'd mentioned, the nut butters I was terrified of, but really more than anything was carbs. So,
Mhm.
like, I would go I was probably keto looking back on it without even like putting a label on it or realizing, because I just was terrified of carbs. And couldn't even tell you where that came from. Probably, social media at some point. And so, yeah, just even looking back, I think sometimes when you're so far in recovery, like even just you reflecting that back on me, I'm like, oh, yeah, that is really crazy. It's like you don't realize how far you've come. And I think what you mentioned about that pleasure, like, bringing joy, I think that is really my why. And that is a huge part of our mission at Oat Haus. It's like, yes, our product is allergen free. Yes, it's like gluten free, all these things. But I never love to lead with that, because then it kind of puts your product in, it puts this food in like a different part of your brain. At least for me, it's like if I'm eating something and I'm like, okay, I'm eating this because it's healthy for me, that's just a totally different experience than, oh, I'm eating this because it makes me so happy. It brings me so much pleasure, so much joy. It makes my body feel good. Like it's just a different energy, a different vibration. And not to get too woo woo, but yeah, I think, with pasta, it's like, sure, maybe regular pasta, doesn't have much nutritional value, and that's great. That's okay. Because I think there's just this whole level of soul nourishment that really needs to happen. And when
Yes.
I was struggling with food, I was avoiding carbs, that's when I was binging a lot. And what I actually really realized was the reason I was binging so much wasn't because I was physically hungry. Like I was eating adequately, I would say, amount of food, but I was so strict and rigid with what I was allowing myself to eat. There was no pleasure, there was no joy in what I was
Mhm.
eating. And so at the end of the day, it's like you really can only, white knuckle it for so long. And so then there'd be a night where, maybe I'm hormonal or I'm hangry and tired and like my willpower is just worn down. And then I would like let myself have one little cookie, and then I'd be like, oh my God, I blew it. I'm going to eat the whole sleeve of cookies and then start like get back on the wagon the next day.
Yep.
And I know so many people listening can relate because it's just very common. And
Yeah.
I think especially as women. And so once I started, that's why I think like play and fun is so important. It's not just because it feels good, but it really is important, like with everything. And it just reverberates out to all your different relationships, especially with food. And so it's like once I started incorporating more pleasure, more fun into my day, I didn't rely on food to provide all of that for me. And it's
Yeah.
totally still can, right? It's like I still love food. I have a food company, but it doesn't nourish everything. And I think I also realized that it was not serving me either, right? It's like when you're putting all that pressure on your meal to bring you like all of the joy and pleasure and
Mhm.
happiness for your whole day, like that's a lot of pressure. And like one meal, even if you're eating at a Michelin star restaurant, like it probably can't do that. And then once the meal's over, then what, Like then you're
Yeah.
just going to be so shattered. And that's why I think I was just constantly thinking about food, because as soon as I finished one meal, I'd be, just like ruminating about the next one. So, anyways,
Mhm.
there's a lot there, but um, I think, yeah, bottom line is just the most amount of joy and pleasure and play you can find in multiple aspects and dimensions of your life, and not just relying on food. That will, at least that's what helped me.